My husband bought his son a new PlayStation after I sold the old one to pay for cleaning the home he trashed. When I asked him why, he said, "You went behind my back. He's just a kid." I didn't say a word. That was 3 months ago. Yesterday, he opened Trevor's laptop and I watched the color drain from his face. When I met Damien, it was like fireworks were going off in my entire body. He was exactly the man I had been manifesting since I was a teenage girl, so I was willing to work through any issue that came up, except for one, his stepson, Trevor. I had faith that Damien would be understanding if I brought it up, but I wanted to figure it out myself. But nothing I did ever seemed to work because, well, quite frankly, he was a man-child. At this point, he was 22, still living with Damien, unemployed, no plans for the future. One Saturday, I spent 4 hours making us 3 homemade pizzas each, so by the time we all finished eating, I was exhausted. Naturally, I asked Damien and Trevor if they wouldn't mind cleaning up. There was a lot to do, so 2 sets of hands was entirely necessary. "Of course, beautiful," Damien said. Lo and behold, half an hour later when they should have been finished, I could still hear the dishes clattering in the kitchen, and when I went downstairs, I was faced with Trevor man-spreading on the couch, with an e-cigarette popping in and out of his mouth. I simply asked why he wasn't helping his father. His response could only be likened to a 5-year-old not getting a cookie from the cookie jar. He jolted up, stomped his foot on the floor and said, "Don't tell me what to do," before trudging up the stairs. That's when Damien barged in. "You're my wife, not his mother. Don't let this happen again." But this was just one example of his entitlement. He is now 24, and things have only gotten worse. Eventually, my stubbornness wore out, and I brought his extremely recurring behavior up to Damien. "He's an adult. If you don't like how he lives, ignore him," was always his response, which soon escalated to, "You always find something to complain about when it comes to him." So, as you can imagine, our relationship has definitely been strained due to Trevor's need to be coddled, even after I moved in with them. But 2 weeks ago, what little we had left completely fell apart. I had just come home from working a double shift, and Damien and Trevor created an intervention for me. "You're not pulling your weight in this house, and it's putting unwanted stress onto Trevor." I stared at Damien, genuinely holding back a laugh. "You can't just help to tidy the public areas of the house. You should be helping to clean Trevor's room with me." I swear I thought they were pranking me. But that's when I turned to Trevor and asked if he would do something in exchange, like getting a job, any job, for instance. He then looked at me with a completely straight face and said, "Would you have asked your newborn baby to pay you for feeding them?" Exactly. I shouldn't have to earn the basic necessities of life. I saw red. He knew I had just had a miscarriage, that I was deemed infertile. And when I turned to Damien, he just sat there with his arms crossed while nodding. I knew if I stayed on that couch, I would do something that I'd regret. So I left the house and went on a walk. In the week following, me and Damien became glorified roommates. Well, yesterday evening, Trevor finally wasn't home and I had the day off. So I decided to clean the entire house. I know this sounds weird, but it's something I genuinely enjoy. I even wiped down the windows, polished the floors, dusted the door frames, used a lint roller on the lampshades. I felt like Monica from Friends. And when I was done, I got to bathe in that post-clean euphoria. I felt like a princess. And aside from waking up at 4 a.m. to the sound of Trevor slamming the front door, I slept like one too. But when I woke up, the entire house smelled awful, like someone had rubbed cow dung all across the walls. And when I got out of bed, I found out why. You see, there was filthy, disgustingly unclean laundry sprawled all across the floors downstairs, and it produced an aroma so strong that it literally reached my bedroom. There was spilled hot sauce. A tin of tuna without a lid splattered everywhere. The air smelled like moldy sour cream. Stale gum covered the mantelpiece. I screamed and went to wake up my husband, who gagged at the smell. He had this look of anxiety on his face and instantly took the blame. "Oh yeah, that was me. I had a lot of beers last night and took things too far." I just stared at him. He tried to stop me from going into Trevor's room, but he couldn't. And when we opened the door, we were hit with the stench of the devil's lettuce. I didn't say anything. Damien just sighed and turned around. As soon as he walked out, I walked into his room. I quietly stole his gaming console, the one I paid 50% for, and sold it. Trevor woke up that same day to the sound of a maid hoovering his room. He smirked and condescendingly thanked me because he thought he had won. But when he found out what paid for it, he wasn't so happy anymore. It's about time. I just nodded and went to the kitchen to make myself some coffee. I was exhausted from the emotional roller coaster, but also feeling this weird surge of energy, like something had finally clicked. Trevor's smugness lasted exactly 47 minutes. That's when one of the cleaners asked him to move his gaming setup so they could vacuum underneath. "Where's my Xbox?" he practically shrieked. I heard him stomping around, throwing things, looking under furniture. Then he burst into the kitchen where I was calmly sipping my coffee and reading a book. "Where is it?" His face was so red I thought he might actually explode. "Where's what?" I asked innocently. "My Xbox. It's gone." I took another sip of coffee before answering. "Oh, that. I sold it." His jaw literally dropped. "You what?" "I sold it to pay for the cleaning crew. They're not cheap, you know." Trevor started sputtering something about how I couldn't do that, how it was his property. That's when I dropped the bomb. "Actually, I paid for half of it. And since you destroyed a house that I also pay half for, I figured it was a fair trade." He stormed out and I heard him frantically calling Damien. I knew what was coming next, but for once, I didn't care. I finished my coffee and waited. 20 minutes later, Damien burst through the front door like he'd been shot out of a cannon. The cleaning crew was still working, moving around him as he stood in the entryway taking in the scene. "What have you done?" he demanded, looking at me like I'd committed some terrible crime. I explained calmly that Trevor had deliberately trashed the house I'd spent hours cleaning, so I sold the gaming console I'd helped pay for to hire professionals to fix it. Logical consequence, right? Damien wasn't seeing it that way. He started going on about how I had no right, how Trevor was devastated, how I should have talked to him first. The usual defense of Trevor's indefensible behavior. I just let him rant. When he finally ran out of steam, I simply said, "I'm going to my sister's for a few days. I need some space." That stopped him cold. In 3 years, through all our fights and disagreements, I'd never once threatened to leave. I'd always been the one trying to fix things, to make peace, to compromise. "You're being dramatic," he said, but I could see the panic in his eyes. I went upstairs and packed a bag while Damien followed me around, his tone shifting from angry to pleading. I didn't respond to any of it. I just kept packing. cleaning. When I was done, I walked past Trevor's room where he was sulking on his bed, glaring at his phone. "Enjoy your clean room," I said, and walked out. I stayed at my sister Jen's apartment for 5 days. 5 days of ignoring Damien's calls and texts that ranged from apologetic to accusatory, and back again. 5 days of Jen telling me I deserved better, and me crying into wine glasses trying to figure out when my life had become such a mess. On day 3, Trevor started texting me. That was unexpected. First, it was just angry messages about the Xbox. Then they got weirder. He actually claimed I was trying to come between him and his dad, that I was jealous of their relationship. It was so absurd I showed Jen, and we laughed until we cried. On day 5, Damien showed up at Jen's door with flowers and this rehearsed-sounding apology. I agreed to talk to him at a coffee shop nearby. Neutral territory. He started with all the usual stuff. He missed me. The house wasn't the same without me. He was sorry things got out of hand. Then he got to the real point. "Trevor feels terrible about what happened," he said, although I seriously doubted that. "He wants to make it up to you." I raised an eyebrow, not buying it for a second. "He's going to start looking for a job," Damien continued, "and he'll keep his room clean from now on." It was the same empty promises I'd heard before. I stirred my latte and looked Damien in the eye. "I need more than promises this time," I said. "I need actual change." We negotiated for almost 2 hours. By the end, we had what amounted to a contract. Trevor would apply for at least 3 jobs per week. He would contribute to household chores. Most importantly, Damien wouldn't undermine me when I asked Trevor to behave like an adult. I moved back home the next day. Things were tense, but Trevor was surprisingly civil. He even showed me job listings he'd looked at online. I was cautiously optimistic that maybe, just maybe, my dramatic exit had been the wake-up call they both needed. That optimism lasted exactly 8 days. I came home from work to find Trevor and 3 of his friends sprawled across our living room, playing video games on a brand new PlayStation 5, even newer and more expensive than the Xbox I'd sold. Empty pizza boxes and beer cans covered every surface. The friends scattered when I walked in, but Trevor just smirked at me. "Dad got it for me," he said, not even taking his eyes off the screen, "to replace the one you stole." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I waited until Damien got home, then confronted him in our bedroom. "You bought him a new console? After everything we talked about?" Damien avoided my eyes. He was really upset about losing the Xbox. I thought this would help smooth things over. Smooth things over? You completely undermined me. Again, we argued for hours. The same circular argument we'd been having for years, but this time I wasn't backing down. I told him he had to choose. Either he started treating Trevor like the adult he was, or I was done. "You're asking me to choose between my son and my wife," he said, looking hurt. "No, I'm asking you to parent your son so you don't lose your wife." He didn't have an answer for that. We went to bed angry, backs turned to each other. The next morning, he left for work early without saying goodbye. That evening, I came home to find Trevor sitting at the kitchen table, filling out a job application for the grocery store down the street. I was suspicious, but tried to be encouraging. "That's great, Trevor. They're always hiring." He grunted in response, but kept writing. Later, Damien told me he'd had a serious talk with Trevor about growing up and taking responsibility. I wanted to believe things were changing, but I'd been burned too many times before. 2 days later, Trevor actually went to an interview. He didn't get the job, but it was progress. The next week, he applied to 3 more places. He kept his mess contained to his room. He even washed his own dishes a couple times. I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, we'd turned a corner. Then I found the hidden camera in our bedroom. I was dusting the bookshelf when I noticed something odd about the clock radio. There was a tiny pinhole in the front that didn't look right. I picked it up and examined it more closely. That's when I realized it wasn't our usual clock. It was a hidden camera disguised as a clock. My blood ran cold. I immediately checked the bathroom, the living room, everywhere. I found another one hidden in an air freshener in the main bathroom. I was shaking with rage as I waited for Damien to get home. When he walked in, I shoved the clock in his face. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. He looked genuinely confused. "Our clock? Look closer. It's a camera. Someone's been filming us in our bedroom." The color drained from his face. He examined the clock, then the air freshener I'd also found. "I don't understand. Who would do this?" The answer was obvious to me. Trevor. Damien immediately went on the defensive. "That's ridiculous. Why would he do that?" "I don't know, Damien. Maybe because he's a creep? Maybe to blackmail us? Maybe because he hates me and wants to find something to use against me." We were still arguing when Trevor came home. Damien confronted him, showing him the cameras. Trevor acted shocked, denied everything. He suggested maybe I had planted them myself to frame him. That set off another massive fight, with Damien caught in the middle, not knowing who to believe. I couldn't believe he wasn't automatically taking my side on this. These were cameras, in our bedroom, and he was actually entertaining the possibility that I might have put them there. It was insane. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those cameras, wondering how long they'd been there, what they might have recorded. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went downstairs for some water. As I passed Trevor's room, I heard him talking to someone on the phone. "Yeah, she found them." "No, Dad has no idea." Of course he believed me. He always does. I froze, listening intently. Trevor laughed. The look on her face when I said maybe she planted them herself? Priceless. My hands were shaking as I went back to our bedroom. I gently shook Damien awake and told him what I'd heard. He didn't believe me at first, thought I was dreaming, so I suggested we go listen together. Trevor was still on the phone when we got to his door. Damien's face changed as he heard his son laughing about the cameras, bragging about how he could manipulate his dad. For the first time, Damien looked truly angry at Trevor. He pushed open the door without knocking. Trevor's face when he saw us standing there. I wish I'd taken a picture. He tried to backpedal, claimed I was misinterpreting what I'd heard. Damien was unusually quiet. He just held up his hand to stop Trevor's excuses, then turned and walked out. I followed him back to our room, not sure what to expect. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I should have believed you. It was a start, but not enough. Not after years of this behavior." I told him I needed him to take real action this time. The next morning, Damien told Trevor he had 30 days to find a job and start saving for his own place. Trevor threw a fit, accusing me of turning his dad against him. For once, Damien didn't cave. He stood firm, telling Trevor the cameras were the last straw. I wanted to believe this was finally the change we needed, but part of me was waiting for Damien to give in like he always did. To my surprise, he didn't. He helped Trevor create a resume. He took him shopping for interview clothes. He was finally acting like a parent instead of an enabler. Trevor, on the other hand, hand, was furious. He started ignoring me completely. When Damien wasn't around, he'd make these little threatening comments about how I'd regret turning his dad against him. I tried to tell Damien about it, but he thought Trevor was just processing his anger and would get over it. 2 weeks after the camera incident, Trevor got a job at a warehouse. Not exactly a career, but it was full-time with benefits. Damien was thrilled, thinking this proved Trevor was changing. I was more cautious. Something about Trevor's sudden compliance felt off. My suspicions were confirmed when I came home early from work one day with a migraine. As I walked in the door, I heard Trevor and a friend in the kitchen. "She actually thinks I'm going to move out," Trevor was saying, laughing. "Dad will never let that happen. I just need to play along until she gives up and leaves." His friend asked what would happen if I didn't leave. "Then I'll make her leave," Trevor said, his voice suddenly serious. "I've got more dirt on her than she knows." I backed out quietly and sat in my car, trying to process what I'd heard. What dirt could he possibly have on me? I hadn't done anything wrong, unless the cameras. Had they been there longer than I realized? Had he gotten footage of something he could twist and use against me? I called in sick the next day and waited until both Damien and Trevor were gone. Then I tore through Trevor's room, looking for evidence. I found it in a locked box under his bed. The key was taped to the bottom of his desk drawer, not exactly a master criminal. Inside were several flash drives labeled with dates going back 6 months. I took them to Jen's house to view them safely. What I found made me physically ill. Hours of footage from our bedroom and bathroom. Conversations between Damien and me that Trevor had no right to hear. Intimate moments that no one should have witnessed. But worse than that, I found edited clips where Trevor had manipulated the footage, splicing together words and actions to make it look like I was saying horrible things about Damien, or like I was hiding something. I copied everything to my own drive as evidence, then replaced the originals so Trevor wouldn't know I'd found them. I wasn't sure what to do next. If I showed Damien, he might finally see Trevor for who he really was, or he might accuse me of invading Trevor's privacy by searching his room. For 3 days, I carried that flash drive everywhere, paralyzed with indecision. Then Trevor made the decision for me. I came home from work to find Damien sitting on the couch, looking devastated. When I asked what was wrong, he just handed me his phone. On it was a video of me, clearly spliced together from the hidden camera footage. The edited clip made it sound like I was plotting to leave Damien, talking about how I couldn't stand him anymore. "Trevor found this on your laptop," Damien said, his voice hollow. "He was borrowing it to apply for jobs. I hadn't even realized my laptop had been touched. Trevor must have planted the video there." "That's not real," I said desperately. "It's edited footage from the cameras he put in our room." Damien looked uncertain. "Why would he do that?" That's when I pulled out my flash drive and showed him everything. The original footage, the edited clips, all of it. As he watched, his expression changed from doubt to horror to anger. "I'll talk to him," he said when we were done. "No," I replied firmly. "We will talk to him, together, as a united front." When Trevor got home, we were waiting. He took one look at us and knew something was wrong. Before Damien could speak, I held up the flash drive. "We've seen everything, Trevor. The original footage, your edited versions, all of it." His face went through a series of emotions. Surprise, anger, calculation, then finally this fake confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about," he tried. Damien cut him off. "Stop lying. I saw it all. The cameras, the editing, you trying to set up my wife." Trevor's strategy shifted instantly. He burst into tears, claiming he was just trying to protect his dad from me, that he'd overheard me talking about leaving and panicked. The performance was impressive. If I hadn't heard him laughing about his plan with his friend, I might have almost believed him. Damien wasn't buying it this time. "Pack your things," he said quietly. "You're moving out. Tonight." Trevor's fake tears dried up instantly. His face hardened as he looked at me. "This isn't over," he said. "You'll regret this." He stormed upstairs to pack while Damien called Trevor's uncle to arrange a place for him to stay. I sat on the couch, emotionally drained but feeling like a weight had been lifted. Finally, after years of manipulation, Damien was seeing the truth. Later that night, after Trevor had left with his uncle, Damien and I talked for hours. He apologized over and over for not believing me, for enabling Trevor, for putting our marriage at risk. I was hurt but also relieved that we might finally have a chance to rebuild. "I'm going to start therapy," Damien said. "I need to understand why I let this go on so long." We went to bed that night closer than we'd been in months. As I drifted off to sleep, I allowed myself to hope that maybe we could actually fix things. The next morning, I woke up to frantic pounding on our front door. It was 6 a.m., and when I looked out the window, I saw police cars in our driveway. My heart nearly stopped. I shook Damien awake and we rushed downstairs together. When we opened the door, 2 officers asked if they could come in. They explained that Trevor had filed a complaint against me, claiming I had assaulted him last night before he left. "That's ridiculous," Damien said immediately. "I was here the whole time. Nothing like that happened." The officers asked if we had any proof. That's when I remembered. Our security cameras. After finding Trevor's hidden cameras, we'd installed a legitimate security system that covered the entryway and living room. I pulled up the footage from the previous night on my phone, showing Trevor leaving with his uncle. No confrontation, no assault. The officers looked relieved. They explained that Trevor had shown up at the station with a bruised face, claiming I had hit him when Damien wasn't looking. The footage clearly showed that was impossible. After they left, Damien called Trevor's uncle. Apparently, Trevor had punched himself in the face after arriving at his uncle's house, then waited until morning to go to the police. His uncle had tried to stop him, but Trevor had stormed out. "This has to stop," Damien said after hanging up. "He needs help, but I can't let him destroy our marriage anymore." He called Trevor and told him to meet us at a restaurant that afternoon. Public place, plenty of witnesses. When Trevor arrived, his face was indeed bruised, though not as badly as I'd expected. He glared at me as he sat down. Damien got straight to the point. "The police showed us your complaint. We showed them our security footage. They know you lied." Trevor started to argue, but Damien cut him off. "I'm getting you help whether you want it or not. You have 2 choices. Either you go to therapy and get a real job and start dealing with your issues, or you're completely on your own. No money, no support, nothing." Trevor looked stunned. This was the first time Damien had ever given him a real ultimatum with actual consequences. "You're choosing her over me?" he asked, his voice small. "No," Damien replied. "I'm choosing what's best for you, even though you can't see it. And I'm choosing my marriage, which I've been neglecting for too long." Trevor stormed out, leaving his untouched food behind. Damien and I sat in silence for a moment. "Do you think he'll agree to therapy?" I asked. Damien sighed. sighed. I don't know, but for the first time, I'm not chasing after him. He needs to make this choice himself. For the next 3 days, I didn't hear anything from Trevor. Damien tried calling him a few times, but just got voicemail. His uncle confirmed Trevor was still staying with him, but was mostly holed up in the spare bedroom, refusing to talk about therapy or jobs or anything really. Part of me felt relieved he was gone, but I also kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting him to jump out and surprise me with some new scheme. Damien was weirdly quiet during those days. Not angry quiet like before, but thoughtful quiet. I caught him staring at old photos of Trevor as a kid a couple times. He scheduled his first therapy appointment and actually asked if I wanted to join him for a session later on. That was huge coming from him. On the 4th day after our restaurant confrontation, I came home from a brutal shift at the hospital to find Damien sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of him. "What's all this?" I asked, dropping my bag on the counter. Trevor's baby photos, school records, birthday cards. He pushed one across the table to me, a handmade card with wobbly letters spelling "Happy Birthday, Dad" in crayon. I've been trying to figure out where I went wrong. I sat down next to him and sighed. "You didn't go wrong by loving him, Damien." "No, but I went wrong somewhere." He gathered the papers into a messy pile. "My therapist says I've been compensating for Jen's death by refusing to set boundaries with Trevor. Like if I was perfect enough as a dad, it would make up for him losing his mom." I didn't know what to say to that. It made sense, but hearing Damien finally acknowledge it hit differently. I reached across and squeezed his hand. The doorbell rang, interrupting our moment. We looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. Neither of us was expecting visitors. It was Karma, Trevor's uncle's wife, standing on our porch looking seriously stressed out. She had this giant tote bag, and her hair was all messy like she'd been running her hands through it. "Sorry to just show up like this," she said when I opened the door. "But Trevor left this morning and Charles is worried sick." Damien appeared behind me. "Left? To go where?" Karma shrugged. "He didn't say, just packed his stuff and took off. But he left this behind." She hefted the tote bag. "Charles thought you might want to see it." We took the bag to the kitchen table. Inside was Trevor's laptop, a bunch of flash drives similar to the ones I'd found, and notebooks filled with what looked like journal entries. Damien pulled out the laptop and opened it. "Should we be looking at this?" I asked, feeling weirdly invasive even though Trevor had had no such qualms about our privacy. "Charles already did," Karma said. "That's why he sent me over with it. You need to see what's on there." Damien navigated to the video folder and clicked on the first file. It was Trevor talking directly to the camera, like some kind of vlog. "Day 1 of Operation Get Rid of Lisa," he said to the camera. The timestamp showed it was from almost a year ago, right after I moved in. "Dad thinks he wants to be with her, but I know better. No one will ever replace Mom." My stomach dropped as Damien clicked through more videos. Trevor had documented everything. The planted cameras, his deliberate sabotage of my cleaning, even rehearsing what he would say to make Damien take his side. There were dozens of these videos spanning months. "Jesus," Damien whispered, his face pale. He was planning this the whole time. Karma nodded grimly. "There's more. Check the notebook labeled Phase 2. The notebook contained detailed plans for what Trevor was going to do next. He had this whole scheme worked out to plant blow in my car and then tip off hospital security. He'd researched how nurses get substance tested and what kind of substances would get me fired immediately. There were notes about finding someone to hack my email to send fake resignation letters to the hospital administration. But the scariest part was the section titled Last Resort. Trevor had written, "If nothing else works, accident at work. Nurses handle dangerous meds all the time. One mistake with the wrong patient." I felt physically sick. This wasn't just a jealous kid acting out anymore. He was actually planning to destroy my career, maybe even set me up to harm a patient. "We need to call the police," I said, my voice shaking. Damien was already pulling out his phone when it buzzed with a text. He looked down and his face changed. "It's Trevor. He says he's coming home to talk." I immediately started gathering all the evidence back into the tote bag. "We need to hide this. If he knows we've seen it." "No," Damien interrupted. "No more hiding. No more pretending. We're going to confront him with all of it." I stared at him. "Are you sure? What if he gets violent?" Karma cleared her throat. "Charles is on his way too. He'll be here in 10 minutes. Damien's jaw was set in a way I'd never seen before. Trevor needs to face what he's done. All of it. We spent the next few minutes making copies of the most damning evidence, just in case Trevor tried to destroy the originals. I texted my sister Jen to come over too. More witnesses seemed like a good idea. Trevor showed up about 20 minutes later. He looked terrible. Unshaved, dark circles under his eyes, clothes rumpled like he'd been sleeping in them. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Dad, I've been thinking." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the laptop and notebook spread across the table. His eyes darted to Karma, then back to the evidence. "What is this? You tell us," Damien said, his voice unnervingly calm. "Operation Get Rid of Lisa? Phase 2? Last Resort? Want to explain what all that means?" Trevor's face went through this weird transformation. Shock, then anger, then this calculated innocence. "Those are just stories I was writing. Fiction. For a creative writing class I was thinking about taking." Before Damien could respond, the front door opened again as Charles and Jen arrived almost simultaneously. Trevor's expression hardened when he saw them. "So this is an ambush?" he demanded. "You all gang up on me because of some stupid writing exercise?" Damien clicked play on one of the videos. Trevor's own voice filled the room. "Day 47. Dad actually believed me when I said Lisa planted the cameras herself. What an idiot. He's so desperate to think I'm still his perfect little boy." Trevor lunged for the laptop, but Charles caught him by the arm. "Enough, Trevor. It's over." What happened next shocked all of us. Trevor started crying. Not the fake tears from before, but genuine body-shaking sobs. He collapsed into a chair, his face in his hands. She was trying to replace Mom. He choked out between sobs. Everyone was forgetting Mom, moving on like she never existed. Dad was happy without her. It wasn't right. The room went silent except for Trevor's crying. Damien looked absolutely gutted. He moved toward Trevor but stopped when I grabbed his arm and shook my head. This could still be manipulation. "Trevor," Damien said finally, "your mom would be horrified by what you've done. She raised you better than this." That just made Trevor cry harder. "You don't know that. She's gone. Nobody knows what she would think." "I do," Charles said quietly. "Julie was my sister, remember? And she would be so disappointed to see you using her memory as an excuse to hurt innocent people." Trevor's crying gradually subsided into these hiccuping breaths. He looked around the room room, seemed to realize he wasn't getting the sympathy he wanted, and his expression changed again. Whatever, he muttered. None of you understand. I'm out of here. He stood up, but Damien blocked his path. No, you're not. We're not done. Trevor tried to push past, but Damien didn't budge. Move, Dad. Not until we figure this out. You need help, Trevor. Real help. Trevor laughed, this bitter sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. Help? You think a therapist is going to fix this? Nothing's going to bring Mom back. Nothing's going to make me okay with you replacing her. I'm not trying to replace your mother, I said, speaking directly to Trevor for the first time. I never was. He turned to me, his eyes narrowed. Right. You just moved into her house, slept in her bed, tried to mother her son. No, I interrupted. I moved into Damien's house. I sleep in Damien's bed. And I never tried to be your mother. I tried to be your friend. You're an adult. Trevor blinked, like that perspective had never occurred to him. Damien spoke up again. Trevor, we have two options here. Either you agree to intensive therapy, and I mean real commitment, not just showing up and going through the motions, or I'm taking this evidence to the police. You wouldn't? Trevor scoffed. Your own son? To protect my wife from having substances planted in her car? To prevent you from potentially harming hospital patients? Damien's voice was steady. Yes, I would. I love you, but I won't let you hurt innocent people. The standoff lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. Eventually, Trevor's shoulders slumped. Fine, he muttered. I'll go to therapy. We spent the next 2 hours working out the details. Trevor would stay with Charles and Karma, who already had security cameras throughout their house, thankfully. He would attend therapy 3 times a week. Damien would pay for it, but Trevor had to get a job to contribute to his living expenses. We'd review the arrangement in 3 months. Before Trevor left with Charles and Karma, Damien pulled him aside for a private conversation. I couldn't hear what was said, but when they came back, Trevor wouldn't look me in the eye. He paused at the door, though, and mumbled what might have been sorry before walking out. After everyone left, Damien and I sat in exhausted silence on the couch. I wasn't naive enough to think one confrontation had magically fixed everything, but it felt like a real turning point. Thank you, Damien said finally, for not giving up on me even when I couldn't see what was happening. I almost did give up, I admitted. Several times. He nodded. I wouldn't have blamed you. He took my hand. I know we have a lot to work through. My enabling, the trust issues, all of it. It's been 6 months since that day. Trevor's been sticking with therapy more or less. Some weeks are better than others. He found a job at a tech repair shop that he actually seems to like. He's still living with Charles and Karma, which is probably for the best. Damien and I started couples therapy in addition to his individual sessions, and it's helped a lot. 2 months ago, Trevor asked to meet me for coffee. Just the two of us. Damien was nervous about it, but I agreed. It was awkward at first, neither of us knowing what to say. Eventually, Trevor cleared his throat and said his therapist thought he should apologize to me properly. The apology wasn't perfect. He still tossed in a few comments about how I hadn't made things easy, but it was a start. Last week, we all had dinner together for the first time since everything blew up. No dramatic confrontations, no hidden agendas, just a slightly uncomfortable meal with moments of actual normal conversation mixed in. Baby steps. I don't know if Trevor and I will ever have a good relationship. Too much has happened for us to just forget and move on, but I do know that Damien finally sees the situation clearly, and that's what I needed all along. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stood my ground about the Xbox, or if Karma hadn't brought us those notebooks, or if Damien hadn't finally chosen to believe me. I like to think we'd have gotten here eventually, but honestly, I'm not sure. What I am sure about is that our home is finally peaceful. No hidden cameras, no deliberate sabotage, no walking on eggshells, just me and Damien, rebuilding what Trevor tried to destroy. It turns out I didn't need to manifest a perfect man after all. I just needed one willing to grow and change when it mattered most.